Hello, my name is SUTEN, and I call myself the timekeeper. I'm an astrologer and numerologist. And my prior videos, I introduced the concept of know thyself. And I did different videos emphasizing the physical aspect of self, the emotional aspects of self, and the mental aspects of self, and the spiritual aspects of self. I wanted that to be a foundation for the other videos that I'm going to present, because knowing yourself is one thing, but also we need to know our environment. We need to know why we came here, who we are, and what our purpose is. So I brought that into a climax in that now, since we have dealt with know thyself, now I'm going to do at least 6 or probably 12 videos on astrology, numerology, and the origins of consciousness. This is vital. Now, I'm also going to speak of, today I'm going to speak about a phenomenon called Mercury Retrograde. And I have been asked a lot of questions as an astrologer about Mercury Retrograde, and it's kind of funny. Different people experience different things, and some people are skeptical, and I welcome skepticism because it's a good platform for conversation about any subject and any object. And we have to be objective with any object that we perceive. We have to be open to a knowledge outside of structured knowledge, because we have been somewhat dumbed down to believe particular things, and how we've been conditioned. A lot of our belief systems are belief systems that we have inherited from our parents or from authorities in our lives. And that's not a bad thing, but you have to be able to experience and live the philosophy that you take into your life. Does it work for you? Does certain things prove to be a practical instrument by which you can live by to help you overcome everyday problems? It's very important that you're able to assume and gain a certain type of knowledge that can help you overcome the challenges of the society, the challenges of marriage, relationships, children, the self. All these different things are necessary for you to be initiated into a higher self, but at the same time you need a reference or a paradigm meaning a repository of knowledge that you can go to help you manage and organize what we call life. And so when we speak of astrology, the origins of astrology is way beyond comprehension, is way beyond religion, is way beyond the pyramids, is way beyond any type of so-called scientific thought, because astrology actually started when we became, as human beings, conscious. Because in the beginning, and when we talk about life, and we talk about living, and we talk about being human in the human condition, we went through a process in becoming who we are. Nothing just pops up. There's a process. And when you speak of and think of life, and you think of you being a human, then you just didn't pop up. There was a process. You grew in different stages inside the womb of your mother. And those different stages are called recapitulation, because the human body and nature and the universe is the greatest books, because these books, the human body, is what you experience directly. There's certain things and certain knowledge when it comes to knowing things on a certain level. You can't obtain it from a book. You can't obtain it from a university. You can't attain it to somebody telling you. Some things are so deep and so powerful that the only way that you can attain it is to a supernatural, powerful paradigm, which a lot of people don't understand was supernatural. Supernatural and a miracle is when you see daylight. It is a miracle when nighttime comes and you see that cycle. You see that cycle from day to day. That is supernatural. And that experience speaks to you. Is this that we haven't been able, or we haven't been taught to recognize and see that when we see daylight, when we see the human body, when we hear someone speak, when we hear somebody talk, when we hear someone singing, all those are miracles. But it was a process for those miracles in that human condition to come to what it is. And so there is a concept called recapitulation, meaning that what human beings went through in terms of process is repeated every time a child grows in the womb of the mother. If you were to look at an x-ray, or if you study genetics, if you studied embryology, how the embryo grows, when you first see the embryo in its first stages, it looks like a little fish, a little reptile, and then it changes the next month. And these different months represent thousands of years of the process that I was speaking of. So all of us are part of a process. All of us emerge from water. We're in the water and liquid of our mothers, the ocean of water. And then we grow in different stages. And then the 9th stage, or the 7th or 8th stage, it all depends. We come through the process, being in our mother's womb, and we come out the doors, the wombs of our mother, and we are looked upon, and we, if the miracle is complete, then we are looked upon to be what you call a human being. And so in the videos, and when I speak to you, we're going to, something happened to me when I was 12 years old, and I went in spiritually. I was very introverted, and I went inside myself spiritually, and I asked the spirit within me, I asked the Creator to teach me and give me wisdom, knowledge, and understanding beyond the surface, beyond what has been taught to me. And that spirit told me to forget about everything that I think I know. And every word that I say, every thought that I think, change from what you thought or think or looked upon something, and review it in detail. So I found out then that when we talk about human beings, when we say male, we say female, all these are labels and names that has been put upon human beings. And if this human being has certain type of physical characteristics that is associated with female, then that's the brand name. That is a girl, or that is a female. And if this human being over here has particular physical characteristics, then they're named a male. And what's powerful about that is that we have to go beyond labels and look at human beings, whether they have the label of male or whether they have the label female. We have to look at them as souls. And so what can happen is, from an astrological standpoint, we know that nothing happens haphazardly. You're born on a certain day, a certain month, a certain year, a certain time, for a particular purpose. And you asked for your parents. These are the type of things that's not discussed. These are the type of things that they won't discuss or don't know. But in me going within and gaining revelation, me going within and finding out through prayer and meditation and listen to spirit and looking at life differently than what we have been told, because as I said before, we've been dumbed down. When we were children and we were 5 or 6 years old, our innocence made us very wise, made us very spiritual. We could pick up different vibrations from people. We could pick up different vibrations from the environment that we're in. Some people keep that attribute and some people lose it. But everything that happens to us happens to a reason. And so going back to when astrology, quote unquote, supposedly started, there was no beginning, because what happens is what we call time is an illusion. What we call time is a human mental creation, meaning that from a spiritual standpoint, there's no such thing as time. But as we evolved, as I gave before, from being that reptilian-like life form, and we were first one cell, and we began to multiply and multiply, and the human body, once it completes its multiplication within the womb, you have at least 120 trillion cells, but you started off as one cell. But what happens is understanding who we are as human beings is not just about the self, it's about the environment, the outer structure, that while we are going through the process, and I was trying to say, or I said, that the process that we go through in our mother's wombs represent the process that human beings went through to become what and who they are. It was a process. And during that process, when you talk about the physical aspects and the emotional aspects and the instinctive aspects of who we are, the planets, as we call it, the messengers, which they really are, and then when you talk about that, you're talking about some things that I will go through in the text, the videos that deals with what we call extraterrestrials, because we ourselves are stars wrapped up in flesh. And so we're connected to the universe. We are what you call microcosm, a small, M-I-C, a small world in relation to a large world, a macrocosm. So you have a microcosm and you have a macrocosm. It's a connection. And as we were being processed as human beings on this planet, there were beings that were here before us. There were beings in the universe that interconnected with us, that spoke to us on certain levels. We'll get into that later. But as the rhythms of the moon would go around the earth, we connected to that rhythm. As the rhythm of the earth going around the sun, we connected to that rhythm. We connected with that. And as human consciousness evolved, because in the beginning we were like a sleeping baby, but we were still in the womb, which we call earth, and we were surrounded by water. The universe was an ocean, and we've been told that it's such thing as nothing. Space is nothing. But space, I want you to hear this, space is something. Just because you don't see anything inside what we call space, space is something. And as we existed in the ocean of space, and we connected and synchronized with the rhythms, we began to realize and see. We didn't see it before, because I told you when we were talking about before you had a face, there's things you didn't even realize, but all of a sudden a realization came. And that's what happened to us in terms of us being on this planet and evolving. We evolved and we were connected to that rhythm, and we synchronized with the rhythm of the moon. We synchronized with the rhythm of the earth going around the sun. And we began to realize that there was a rhythm, and we began to realize and looked and eventually call what we call today daylight. We connected to daylight. And then we saw and experienced what we call night. And we saw that rhythm of day, and then we experienced, not only saw, that's another thing that makes astrology so powerful and so human, is because it's deeper than a book. A book is up here. When you read it, it's up here. But when you experience daylight, woo, and you experience night, woo, you experience that mentally, spiritually, emotionally, and physically. And so it's a different type of education. It's a different type of knowledge. And my position with you is to make you more conscious. That's the key. The knowledge that you need to know, the esoteric, the mysteries that people call mysteries and people call deep, is right in front of your face. But because of us being programmed and conditioned, we don't see it, even though it's right in front of your face. There's a statement that I make that says, the eyes only see what the mind is being prepared to comprehend. And so only until you are able to connect with a particular subject or particular idea, only through experiencing that idea will you really start seeing what the idea is all about, because you have an inner eye. Some talk about a third eye, but you have an inner eye, third eye, that enables you to comprehend the mysteries of the universe, the mysteries of life and death. For those who are curious about those kind of subjects, a lot of times it's hard to understand why people die, but we never die. It's the physical form that dies. And so it's my position to connect you with the rhythms of life, so that you will know and understand that we came here from the spirit plane and came into a physical form called the physical body. But we came here so that we could leave. That's the only reason why we're here, but we have a purpose in being here. And going back again to astrology, and what makes it powerful is that we experience it from day to day. The moon going into different angles, those angles are called signs. So the moon now, for instance, is in Scorpio. That has a meaning, that has a vibration. Right now, and I'm getting back to it, but I wanted to explain in depth what makes Mercury retrograde as powerful that it is. In that process, and us engaging in that rhythm, we're dealing with processes again, and dealing with the process of rhythm, we begin to connect, as I say, to the planets. And you have 10 planets, or actually the sun and the moon are not planets. The sun is a star and the moon is a satellite. But you have other planets, and one of those planets, and I'm going to go over again through the videos all the planets in detail, but right now we're going to focus on Mercury. All the planets have an affiliation through that rhythm and connection to different parts of our body. I'll say that again. Because of that process, this is what validates astrology. For anyone who's skeptical, for anyone say, oh, that's not a science. It's a science of the human body. It's a science of the soul. Hepetziba is the African name for astrology, which means journey of the soul. It's deeper than anything you can learn from a university. It's deeper than anything you can learn from a person. I'm just verbalizing and hoping that you become more conscious of the experience yourself of day and night, of summer and fall, winter and spring. All this is astrological. All of these are experiences that we come in contact in our lives. That's direct. It's direct experience. There's nothing more powerful than direct experiences, as opposed to somebody telling you, as opposed to you reading in a book. Okay, books are good for you. What is good for? I have a library of books, so trust me. But there's nothing like direct experience. Even the concept of what we call God, until you experience what you call and what we call God, is this idea up here. It sits up here. Only into, and most of the time, from a spiritual standpoint, we experience what we call God during traumatic times like life and death. If you ever notice that when you at a homegoing or what they call a funeral, and the person is lying in the casket, there's an eerie silence that's within you and within others. You may talk, you may sing, you may shout, you may play instruments, whatever, but there's a deep inner silence. And that silence is telling us and speaking to us that when it's time for us to leave the body, there's a powerful silence that you all and we all will experience, especially if it's to our loved ones. That silence, when we talk about the signs represents 12 different aspects of human experience. And so when we talk about death, life, we're talking about a sign that's called, or experience that's called Scorpio. Scorpio deals with life and death. Scorpio, or that aspect of life, we all have this aspect of, we all have experienced some type of death. That death is important because in order for us to live, we have to die. If you're 5 years old, or I'm sorry, if you're 10 years old, you shouldn't act like you're 5. You have to leave that. You have to die from that. And you're 10 years old now. If you're 15, you shouldn't act like you're 10. So I'm expressing this with you because what we experience in life, there is a numerological, a metaphysical, and an astrological comparison. An astrological language that's connected to that. And the astrological language for life and death, sexuality, research is called Scorpio. And so with that rhythm again, I know I'm supposed to be talking about Mercury Retrograde. Before I go to Mercury Retrograde, I just want to share this with you because Mercury represents a rhythm that we're connected with. That's why I went through that whole phase, that whole lecture about rhythm and connecting. And what Mercury represents, and I told you that each planet has an alignment with different parts of the body. Mercury represents the intellect. Mercury represents cognition. Cognition meaning how we're able to bring different things together. I've gathered this here, I've gathered that there, and I'm bringing all this information together to evaluate and see what this information is all about. How we gather that information, the mind has 5 windows. I'll say it again. The mind has 5 windows by which it sees what we call reality. That's another lecture in itself, because if you're not aware and you are not conscious, then you will see life. And that's another point that I'm going to make in my videos. I'll probably keep repeating it, that we see what you call reality in life through a little small keyhole. Huh. Can you imagine? Outside of that keyhole, how much we are missing? So it's important that we realize, in order for us to come to higher consciousness, first we have to be able to realize and know a particular thing. And in knowing that particular thing, then we can start reaching for a higher consciousness. If you don't know that you don't know, then you will never know. So you have to first know that you don't know. That's important. And that knowing means you become more conscious of what you're doing. how you're thinking. What is your dialogue? You have to think about what you think about. That's the first stages of higher consciousness. What type of inner dialogue do you have? Do you tell yourself that you are too fat, you too skinny, you don't like the way you look? If you tell yourself that and you have that type of inner dialogue, then the subconscious takes that in, and whatever you are thinking will become your reality. So we have to be conscious of how we think. And so when we talk about Mercury retrograde deals with cognition and how we think. Mercury deals with communication, how we interact and how we speak to another person. Mercury deals with speaking and your inner dialogue. Mercury deals with your perceptions. And so your perceptions, when we talk about the mind, I said there are 5 windows. One of the windows is eyesight, seeing. The other window is hearing, okay? Seeing, hearing. Those are windows that we perceive what we call reality. Know that. Be conscious of that. If you know that and you're conscious of that, then it's going to change your whole approach of how you perceive what you call reality. And then you're going to say, wow, what is reality? But we're going to get to that later. But this is the beginning. This is the start of you becoming more aware. And when you are more aware, then you become more powerful. When you become more powerful, then what happens at your job, what happens in your relationship, what happens to you, you got a total different perception of what's going on. So we said seeing, we said hearing, smell. This is how we connect with the external world. We have an internal world and we have an external world. Okay? Touch. What you feel externally. And then we have taste. So these 5 senses are the windows by which our mind perceives and evaluates what we call reality. And these senses are good for what they're good for, but they're very limited. So if you base your reality on the 5 senses that are limited, then your sense and understanding of reality will be limited. And so we said Mercury deals with that mind then. When Mercury is retrograde, I'm not going to go into the mechanics of what Mercury retrograde is from an astronomical standpoint, it going backwards. I'm not going to go into that. I'll go into it later, but I want to get to this Mercury retrograde because I set up everything so I could finally say this. If you were to say, well, I thought he was going to tell me about Mercury retrograde, but I had to set everything up. So now I'm at Mercury retrograde. We told you about the 5 senses, and Mercury has affinity with the mind. And so when Mercury is what you call retrograde, meaning that in terms of its orbit, it appears to be that it's going backwards. That means that mentally, it's time for you to go within. That's the essence of Mercury retrograde. It's time for you to go within in your thinking. And the primary and important prefix for Mercury retrograde word that you can experiment with yourself is RE. RE. So what do you mean RE? To understand Mercury retrograde and what you need to participate in is to review what's going on in your life. You need to have a journal during this time because it is a powerful time for meditation and introspection. So review to regenerate. What have you been eating? How is your diet? Have you exercised? How do you feel from an emotional, mental, and spiritual standpoint? Mercury retrograde, RE, to remind, RE, to remind yourself, where are you? Are you happy? Are you sad? And if you're happy or you're sad, why are you happy or sad? These things give you a intuitive understanding of life, because it is needed periodically. And this is what Mercury retrograde is about from a spiritual standpoint. I'm going to give you the mundane reasons, but from a spiritual standpoint, Mercury retrograde means for you to go within. Because during this time, the surface mind is going backward within and connecting with the subconscious mind. And so during this time, the subconscious mind is connected to the conscious mind, which means that it's like you going downstairs in your basement. A lot of times you have stuff in your basement and you forgot all about it. You didn't know it was down there, or some things you needed to do. Well, this is the same thing. I'm giving you that metaphor in terms of Mercury retrograde. It's time for you to go into the subconscious and or the basement of your inner self and examine what you have done within the last 3 months. Mercury retrograde appears 4 times a year, 3 weeks and a half. Each period is about 3 weeks and a half. So what's happening also when we talk about rhythm is that nature has periods where it at its highest, because when we talk about life, it's not a straight line. Life is cyclic. It goes in cycles, but it also goes like in waves, waves and cycles, waves and cycles, waves and cycles. And during this time is actually a time for the conscious mind to rest. And I know that's difficult in the world that we live in. You have to work, you have to take care of your children, or your job, or whatever your life experience is. You can't just say, well, okay, I'm gonna go on the Sabbath all of a sudden. No. But if you can, or you have a situation where you can go on a Sabbath, or you have a situation where you can at least from day to day in the morning time reflect upon your present situation, your present circumstances. Mercury retrograde is a perfect time for that. Now, externally, what happens with Mercury retrograde, because of your conscious mind going within the unconscious mind, sometimes you will say things that you don't realize, or it will be times in communication with others and others communicating with you, there will be misunderstandings. If you're in a relationship, it could be a marriage, it could be a business relationship. If it's things between you and the other person hasn't been resolved, a lot of times with Mercury retrograde, those things that wasn't resolved and you shoved down in the mental basement will come back up, and you'll tell the person, you know, I thought we had dealt with that, and you're bringing that back up again. And so this can happen. People that you may not have heard from in a long time, all of a sudden they will emerge because of Mercury retrograde. So what it means is, and a lot of times when you read textbooks of Mercury retrograde, it'll tell you not to sign contracts. I'll say this, it may come a time where you have to do what you have to do during Mercury retrograde, but if you sign anything, you make sure you understand everything you're signing, that you understand, because the mind is not working on the same level. So you can miss some things, just like in conversations. You can miss some things. You can think a lot of times when people make dates to meet at a certain time, you may forget, or the person may forget that they had a date. If you had a date with them on the 25th, they'll forget that they're supposed to meet you on the 25th. So it's like a misfiring of the brain. That's the best way to put it. It's like it misfires. And so we talked about contracts. Watch signing contracts, your conversation and how you speak to people. Make sure you're understood. Make sure you know what you're saying. It's a very powerful time to think about what you think about while you're speaking. From a mundane standpoint, it's a time because Mercury also has affiliation with short journeys and driving and the mail, computers, electrical appliances. During this time, your phone may just act crazy. This may shut down for no reason. The computer you may have problems with your computer because Mercury from a mundane, when I say mundane, I'm talking about the overall operation of the world. Mundane things. Mundanely, computers, electrical appliances, cars, driving, a lot of times is off the chain because people are not aware. It's that misfiring. And yes, people have accidents every day. But from my observation for the last 30 years of Mercury retrograde is that when it's Mercury retrograde, it be them crazy accidents. Well, somebody is going down the street the wrong way, or people are running lights, or people are driving and they're driving straddle lane, and they just, people drive terrible nowadays anyway. So with Mercury retrograde, it behooves you, trust me, to be very mindful of when you're driving. Be very mindful of how people are driving. Be very apprehensive when you're driving during Mercury retrograde because you will have more accidents. It's no question. So with that saying that, as I said again, I repeat, contracts, speaking, also a lot of times you may get a brain fog and you're speaking and you're talking and wow, what did I say? I'm forgetting, I'm doing it now. I'm making sure that I say everything is in Mercury retrograde. I'm making sure that I be as plain and as I possibly can in describing Mercury retrograde. So, in conclusion, during the time of Mercury retrograde, it's a time of introspection. It's a time of going within. The prefix RE, rejuvenate, remind, reconnect. RE, just any words that you can think of RE is that when Mercury's retrograde in that 3.5 time. And Mercury went retrograde July the 8th, and there's what you call a pre-shadow. So 7 days before an actual Mercury retrograde and the day of the Mercury retrograde. And then you got the 3.5 time. Then after that 3.5, after the Mercury goes direct, there's a shadow. Now some people say the pre-shadow is 2 weeks, and some people say it's a week. So this is something you can experience yourself, but definitely when it starts, you'll be able to see particular things, and you'll be able to gain insight that it's not necessarily a bad time. It's a time for you to be more conscious. So I don't spread the news, oh my God, it's Mercury retrograde, blah, this, blah, blah. Well, you will see a lot of things, but people who are not conscious, as I spoke of before, conscious and being conscious is what's going to give you a higher understanding and a higher learning. Whenever there's an astrological aspect that's going on that can be stressful or that can be somewhat harmful to people who are not aware. So I hope I was able to give you some information and share with you the Mercury retrograde. It's a very spiritual time, very powerful time, very it's a time for introspection, as I said again, and it's a time to go within. It's a time to do research. It's a time to if you have a library or whatever you're doing, to research, rearrange different things and connect different things. The 5 senses would be more sensitive during this time. So the next time that I speak on astrology, I'm going to show you a calendar that you can, some people may just go on their computer, but it's a calendar that you can buy that will give you the dates and times of Mercury retrograde, and let you know also about where the moon is and that type of thing. But I'm going to go into all that. I'm going to go into all that, and I'm also going to start on doing lectures on numerology. So thank you so much. My name is SUTEN. Please subscribe. God bless.